In this video, we're going to go over the alignment of the forward depth and space rod on the Sidewinder 2. A few things I've already done to prepare for that. I've removed the Allen screws from the table. I've also removed the chip guard from the machine. So for the forward alignment, we're going to consult our manual here. It tells us the cutter and guide is a 3mm, so we're going to use the 3mm guide to align the key. It gives us some information here on the setup key. It tells us the setup key is cut to all number 1 or shallow depths, except for the first cut at the bow. The first cut at the bow is cut to a number 5 depth. And then we're going to follow the alignment procedure in the manual. So we're going to highlight that for you here. So we'll get going with all of that. So what we're going to do, the setup key has got 2 sides to it. So we're going to make sure that we use the side that has got this little notch cut out in it at the head of the key. The other side does not have that notch. It's just a straight number 1 cut all the way down the key, but we're going to use that cutout. That'll help us adjust our spacing. So our first step is going to be locating that little hole in the carriage where our Allen wrench will drop down into, which is right there. And we're going to insert our depth rod. And again, with all these kits, the depth rod has to be, the Allen screws at the head of the depth rod have to be loose. So that allows this to turn freely. And this is where we make our adjustment in here. The setting of this is what adjusts the rod. So we're just going to make sure our thumb screw is loose. Insert that into this right side of the machine. And then use a screwdriver to tighten it up. We cannot use the black knob here to tighten the rod into the machine. That'll get us into trouble. So we're just going to turn that until it comes to a complete stop. Make sure it's nice and snug and remove our wrench. With that done, we'll back our carriage up a little bit here. We'll put our forward key into the vise, and if you remember right, forward key, we go all the way to that angled shoulder. So usually what I do is I tighten it up on the narrow part of the key, just crack the vise open, slide that forward, and tighten it up when the angled shoulder touches the edge of the vise. I've got my 3mm guide out. Let's slide that into the collet. And there's no magic to where we're going to insert that to, as long as it's above the table to start with, and the key would clear it. Put our 1/8" Allen wrench in there, tighten it up, and again we're just going to make sure we can get that over top of the key. So with that being done, I'm going to lower my guide onto the cut part of the key, and then I'm going to raise it up just a little bit and tighten this up. I should be able to run all the way down the key. So with my setup key cut to a number 1 depth all along the edge, when I lock in my rod and adjust it properly on a number 1 position, I should just touch the edge of that key. So I'm going to start here and tighten up my thumb screw, engage my rod, make sure I've got a good grip on the number 1 position, and try and push that forward. Now I'm running into the key at this point, which means that the key is too far over. So I'm going to take my screwdriver, insert it in the end of the rod. I'm going to create a little bit of space in there, which I now have. Now I'm too far to the right, and I'm just going to start turning my screwdriver and seeing if I rub up against the edge of my key. And I want to just come in contact with the edge of the key. So I'm going to kind of go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth until I feel, and you can almost hear it there, my guide just touched the right side of the key. So at this point, we're at a number 1 position, and the guide is touching the right side of the number 1 cut on the key. So that's aligned properly. So at this point, I'm just going to snug up the Allen screws. Snug them up on both sides to start with. And then I'm going to crank them down. And at that point, my depth rod for the Ford kit is calibrated correctly. I'll pull that back out. Remove my key. Insert, well, first I have to loosen up my thumb screw. Insert my 3/32 Allen wrench and twist my rod back out of the machine. And that one's all ready to go. Now we're off to calibrate the space rod. So again, I'm going to look down here in the hole and make sure we get our Allen wrench into there, our 3/32 Allen wrench to drop down into there. Our camera a little bit here. And insert a space rod. And again, we need to make sure that both of our Allen screws are loose. The rod should turn freely by holding this. This should spin. I'm going to insert that into the machine. We want to make sure our thumb screw's not interfering. Put our flat screwdriver in the end of the rod and thread it onto the hub inside the machine and come to a complete stop. Remove our Allen wrench, make our key out again, or our table. Insert our setup key once again. Tighten that up. Now the way we're going to align the space rod is at the first position at the head of the key, the guide should drop right in to the setup key. So we're going to get close on that while we do that. Going to engage our space rod by tightening up our thumb screw. And we're going to go to the first space position, which you'll see right there. So we're turning our space rod to a #1 space position. So if we're calibrated right, our guide will fall right into that opening, and as you can see right now it is not. So I'm going to insert my screwdriver in the end of the space rod. You can't see the screwdriver turning, but you can tell the table's moving as I turn the space rod. So I'm just going to keep turning the screw in the end of the space rod until we finally drop into that opening right there. And there's absolutely no pressure from either side of the cut where it drops in, so that's our correct position. Now we'll come back to our space rod, use our 3/32 Allen wrench, snug up those Allen screws, and then really tighten them up. About a quarter turn on each one gets you where you need to be. And that's it for our Ford rod kit. Those are all set up and ready to go. Release our thumb screw, back the carriage out, remove our setup key, and I shouldn't have done that. We'll get back up here and remove our space rod. And we're ready for the next set of rods.